Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our December office hour hosted by the ESEA team and the Office of Federal Programs. For those of you who may not know, my name is Shelley Shassi-Gendro, and I support our team in regards to federal funds associated with title programs. And normally what we do every month is we share some updates that we have for you, and we offer an opportunity for questions and answers. So please know that the chat box is being monitored by the team. We'll also have some time at the end for questions and answers. You folks have received a priority notice back in November that illustrates that the ESEA program at the federal level has transitioned into the U.S. Department of Labor. In that announcement that we put out as the Maine Department of Education, there is a link to the U.S. Department of Education information, along with a few-page handout that talks about the intricacies of what that transition to Department of Labor will look like and how that will be managed in regards to ESEA title programs. We're encouraging you to take a look at the priority notice, but also to take a look at the notice that was provided by the U.S. Department of Ed and Secretary McMahon. What we wanted to denote to you folks right now is we, as the Maine Department of Education, specifically the ESEA team, is continuing to be operational and serving you folks in all ways that you have seen in regards to applications, performance reports, monitoring, and invoicing. We have not yet experienced a delay with the transition to the Department of Labor, and we will continue to keep you updated with any information that we get and how that may affect you folks.
All right, good morning, folks. Just a quick reminder that the FY25 performance report is past due. So make sure if that is something that's still on your plate, that all invoicing through 9/30/25 has been completed. Make sure any page that starts with performance report, you go in and make sure that if there's any required fields that you make sure you fill those out. As part of the 25 performance report, you do have to close out the FY23 grant. So even if you've already spent all your funds, even if you've already submitted that revision, if it wasn't marked as closed out, then you do need to create a new revision. You don't have to change anything, hit submit, and then we can move it over to closeout status. And then make sure anytime either the 25 or the 23 application is returned, that you check that consultant checklist, as that's where we're going to be providing feedback on next steps for you.
Good morning, everyone. I know that there's been a few updates and office hour months that we go over the Title I-A carryover rule, but I do think it's worth in performance report season to have a few reminders to understand how it works. For SAUs that have more than 15% in Title I carryover and receive more than $50,000, you can decide if you want to try and retain these funds or if you want to return them. The rule in statute is you can retain funds only once every 3 years. We've had luck and we've had success with asking the U.S. Ed to waive this 1 in 3 year rule. So that's why sort of if you are an SAU that asked for it last year, you're actually able to again this year in FY25. But it's always a historical record, not a future. So that means that if you've taken the waiver this year, if you're going to keep funds because you have more than 15% left in Title I, your SAU should be under the impression that it's not going to be able to do that in 26 or 27. So again, it's sort of the historical record. Once you do it, can't do it again. We've continued to get that rule waived. So it's just really important to understand how that works. If you have questions, reach out because I think this is an important part of your statute to understand since it has to do with returning funds or not keeping funding. And that's very important to SAUs when they plan their ESEA funds. So talk to your regional program manager if you want to understand, talk to your team. If you do return funds, you will put no on the Title I-A Part A waiver that you are not taking a waiver. You're going to be returning funds. and we do the rest from there on out. If you are taking the waiver and you say yes, that's great. You'll be able to retain those funds. But again, without flexibilities from USED, you won't be able to do that for the next 2 fiscal years. Another big one, especially with closeout, but I think for performance report time, it's really nice to remember and be cognizant for SAUs that have over $500,000 in Title I. You have a mandatory family engagement set aside, at least of 1% of that Title I after transfers. So 90% of that spending should be at the school level, has to be at the school level per statute. We have a family engagement statutory reference document that I find very helpful because we break it down by what the SAU is responsible for when it comes to family engagement and what the school level is responsible for. Just keep in mind here too, the Title I set aside, that if those funds are not spent at that 1%, that means you're not in compliance with statute, and those might have to be returned, especially if there's no opportunity to resubmit those funds. So performance report, it's good to check. Are we spending down our Title I family engagement set aside? Are we in good shape with that? What sorts of things are we allowed to use it on? Can be found in that document. So I'll put that in the chat afterwards. And then there is the Title I spending snapshot that also goes through family engagement requirements, or spending allowability, I should say. So just be mindful of that for SAUs with over $500,000, that you're keeping track of your Title I family engagement set-aside funds.
All right, good morning, everyone. Just one of our annual reminders for folks. Anything you're spending federal funds on, you should be keeping some sort of evidence of what you spent that funding on. For things like supplies and salary and benefits, that kind of happens automatically as you submit those invoices. That backup documentation is saved in the system. But for something like professional development, you want to make sure that locally somewhere, if you're using your ESEA funds to pay for that PD, you are keeping evidence of the agendas, maybe some handouts, any of the presentations, attendance lists, those sorts of things that demonstrate what funding was spent on. And those are things we do look at during monitoring if you spent, again, any of your ESEA funds on PD, not just Title II. And as with any record keeping, it's a good reminder, every year there's turnover in SAUs, and it can be hard if you're an SAU being monitored this year and maybe you didn't work there the previous year. So make sure, save that work somewhere that is publicly accessible. It's kind of future-proof. So if you end up moving on from your current role to a new one, the person who succeeds you at that role is able to easily find that material.
All right, good morning again, folks. Just wanted to give a quick reminder. Every year, Title III has a sub-grant for immigrant children and youth. This is an award given out to one district who has the largest percent increase of immigrant students as compared to the average of the prior 2 years. This year, we're looking at an award of just over $25,000, and we're hoping to make this award in the next day or so. We just received word that our data for student counts has been finalized, so we're able to actually go through and calculate this. So that should be coming out within the next couple days.
As you've seen the theme, we're in a place of friendly reminders for you folks, and this is another one of those friendly reminders. We are strongly encouraging the ongoing conversation with your non-public schools. Again, consultation is not a one and done process, so we know you've identified some use of the funding and some needs that are being serviced through the funding at the non-public school, and we're really encouraging you to have an opportunity to discuss how things are going, what might be some student needs that the equitable services can support. How is the programming going? How are students being evaluated? Friendly reminders about what might need to be collected for future performance reports, indication of where spending is and where they are within the budget associated with equitable services. Now is a good time to start those conversations, but again, always reminding yourselves that this is ongoing conversation throughout the entire fiscal year is really important, and the friendly reminder that we have for you folks today.
Good morning, everyone. Excuse my voice, I'm a little under the weather. Our ESEA monitoring for FY26, the due date is coming on January 9th. So you'll want to check your application and see if you have a medium or high monitoring status. We have a training that we provided earlier this fall, and we can put a link to that in the chat that just walks you through what's required for monitoring for FY26. Feel free to reach out to your RPM if you have additional questions.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tyra Corson. I am the ESEA Management Analyst, and I process all of your invoicing as well as the fiscal monitoring pieces. This is a friendly reminder that the federal fiscal office hours, the next one will be held on January 22nd from 10 to 11. It's an opportunity for you folks to get additional information from all federal grant programs. Please go to the federal fiscal office hour registration link on the event calendar at maine.gov/DOE. So many SAUs maintain their own travel reimbursement policies, often basing mileage rates on the IRS standard rate, which can be found at gsa.gov. The IRS typically reviews this rate annually, with any changes taking effect on January 1st. There has not been any official word that an increase will happen for January 1st, 2026. We just encourage you to review your policies and update these rates as necessary. The current rate for state of Maine mileage reimbursement is 56 cents per mile, and that became effective November 1st, 2025. We recommend that you review all of your procurement policies at least every 3 years. Obviously, with the consistent change in mileage rates, I recommend that you review your travel reimbursement policy annually. A question that is often asked is, are taxes and gratuity tips included in meals and incidental expense rate? Yes, the meals and incidental expense rate does include taxes and tips in the rate, so travelers will not be reimbursed separately for those items. This is if you are using the per diem rates for travel listed at gsa.gov. Next slide. FY26 ESEA federal funding was delayed, as we know, and due to the delays in the funding, Titles 2, 3, and 4, it is possible that you will have two separate substantial approval dates, one for Title 1 and 5, and the other for 2, 3, and 4. Please keep this timing in mind as you begin to obligate your FY26 ESEA funds. If pre-award costs were approved in your FY26 ESEA application, remember that approval applies only to the specific titles and costs identified in the application. On the next slide, we're going to review the when obligations are made. This is from Chapter 34 of the Code of Federal Regulations, 76.707. So, some key takeaways. A written commitment to obtain services or supplies is when an obligation is made. When federal funds are being used to support in part or whole the obligation, services, or supplies, the obligation must be made, services or supplies must be received, and expensed within the period of performance. The period of performance for any ESEA grant begins with the date the application was substantially approved and ends when the grant ends, as noted on your grant award notice, also known as the GAN. So here's an example. FY26 ESEA consolidated application was received substantial approval on 9/1/25. We signed a contract with ABC Consulting in August 30th, 2025. But services weren't received until October of 2025 and paid in October of 2025. Would these expenses be eligible for reimbursement under the FY26 grant? They would not. An obligation was made before the substantial approval date of the application. This is just a reminder of the possible open grants that you could have at this time. I encourage you to review your invoicing status on all of these grants. And the next slide, please. So Monday, December 15th is the deadline to submit invoices for the FY23 ESEA Consolidated Fund Grant and the FY24 Tier 3 School Improvement Funds. Now, I encourage you to go back and look and make sure that any invoices that were previously submitted have not been returned to you for edits. Get those invoices in. Again, the deadline is Monday, December 15th. When submitting these invoices, please make sure that you have a detailed trial balance for the time frame in which the expense posted. So when we're closing out grants, the end date is 9/30. However, we know that salary and benefits that are earned in that last week of September will not post to your expenditure report until October. That is fine. However, the end date on the service period in Grants for Me cannot exceed 9/30. So you put 9/30 there for the service period and you upload the detailed expenditure report where the salary and benefits posted. That is the same for any supplies ordered late in the grant period. You need to prove that they were ordered before the grant's end date. So either an order confirmation or sometimes the invoices state the date that the supplies were ordered. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Good morning, everyone. Just kind of continuing on with our friendly reminders here. I just wanted to share with everyone access to the Maine DOE professional development calendar. I encourage folks to be checking that regularly for opportunities that might come up that would be of interest to themselves or their staff. And you'll notice that I provided a link here in chat to access that at your convenience. Also wanted to be sure that we provided our contact information for those that may be new to their role or may have questions specific to certain programs, or for those folks that are operating in certain superintendent regions of the state. You can find our names, emails, and phone numbers here for contacting us with any questions. And with that, I think we're going to pause our recording here and open the floor up for any questions, concerns, situations that folks might want to talk about with members of our team.